There has been so much utterly bizarre shenanigans going on in the world these days, it can be hard to get a grasp on it. But arguably the strangest thing that is happening that has gotten nearly none of the attention it deserves, nor the analysis, is the increasing prevalence of what are being called comets, fireballs, meteors, or to some what are alien warning shots being sighted across the world. And what's strange about these is that they have all basically begun in March, or at least that's when everything became far more prevalent and when reports began skyrocketing, as there are some earlier examples of this phenomenon we are discussing, but nothing compared to the extent we are seeing now. As such, recapping an event as big and as global as this is really pretty difficult, even when just looking at the events of March alone, because new confirmed sightings are happening now every few days, and some that have already occurred aren't being reported. But since January and February, there were some bizarre fireballs being seen across the world, but something definitely shifted for sure when March hit, and the sightings have been growing exponentially ever since. We have Houston, Texas, San Antonio, Dallas, the great state of Ohio, twice in 1 week, including a landing of one of these objects that struck the earth with such force, residents of my home state felt a shockwave for miles around. Reports of energy bursting through them, being knocked over, and even damage to property.
Now.
Panic as thousands of people took to social media trying to figure out what happened. The noise was heard as far away as New York.
NASA then claims it was a comet striking Earth. It was 6 feet wide and supposedly weighed 14,000 pounds and hit the Earth with a force of 250 tons of TNT, which sounds a lot more like a bomb than I'm comfortable with at this point. Over California, we have multiple sightings, so many it's actually a little hard to pin down. As of now, it seems that multiple of these so-called meteors in just a short period, possibly a day or a few days apart, seen in the skies over Los Angeles, Sacramento, Northern California, with at least one part of California getting a flyby 2 days in a row. And then going across the country to Pittsburgh, there were more fireballs lighting up the sky. Fireball being the blanket term that's been given to these bizarre objects. As we're going to see, not all of them seem to originate from space. And for the most part, these sightings do have some similarities. They all tend to either be red, yellow, or orange, or a mixture of those. They travel relatively fast, leaving a trail behind them. In some strange circumstances, the fireballs also emanate a green or blue hue, and the ones that get close to the surface of Earth or actually hit it are so bright that it seems to become daytime for a brief instant, is what's being reported by the people who see them. These are ones that I think for the most part are easier to assume are meteors, while other of these objects, well, we can't say quite what they are, and they are even being seen traveling in packs of sometimes 2 or more, and can also be spotted disappearing and reappearing, but I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, that is for later. However, as March continued onward and now we're into April, we've got even more places, Indiana, Wisconsin, Michigan, and honestly that's just getting started, because as we're going to see, these sightings do go global. And all of these, like I said, are just since March. And what is important to note is that typically March results in more meteors than normal, and that seems to be a cycle repeated just about every year. It's something sciencey to do with a comet belt, and we don't have the time to get into that, nor do I want to pretend to be an expert on it, so I'm not gonna, but we should know that in March it's expected to be a few more comets than normal. However, what is atypical is now that we're seeing dozens more than normal, dozens of major ones too, some of which are not only making impact, but impacting people's houses. The idea of someone's house being hit by a meteor kind of sounds like a dog eating homework. It doesn't happen very often. And that would be correct, because meteor collisions with a house, depending on the report you read, something like 1 a year across the entire planet of Earth, meaning that it is beyond uncommon. The statistical probability is so close to 0, they're basically neighbors. And yet as of now, at least 3 homes in America have been hit since March began alone. And that is an exponential increase. And some of these meteors are huge, big enough that there's no reason that they should have been missed by agencies like NASA, which have huge multi-billion-dollar budgets for detecting mean space stones that want to make contact with Earth. And as such, why not only are more of these things entering our atmosphere, but more of them are colliding in occupied lands? And maybe you can make an argument that NASA missing one of these, it was an accident, but it's more and more of these that are not only making it undetected into Earth's atmosphere, they are making it undetected and hitting Earth itself. That is a very big no-no, and they're starting to cause damage to property, and there's been no alerts to towns or people about safety precautions and that these things are coming. And so one's got to wonder why that is, as there is no new meteor stream passing by us or that we're passing through, nor are there detections of a new one, nor any forewarning, like I said, about these objects from any space agency, especially to the communities that are now being damaged. which you would think would be the minimum that would be done, right? And as we're going to see, that lack of reporting spreads from NASA to other countries as well. And so with warnings not coming, one has to wonder if that's woeful or willful negligence, or if it's something else entirely. Perhaps that they weren't picked up for some bizarre reason. Both of these are alarming possibilities and are things that result in people getting hurt or maybe even worse. Because as stated, the dramatic increase in meteors entering the atmosphere is one thing, but within those numbers are some anomalies, a growing number of them. Before we go down that rabbit hole too far, I did say that these massively increased numbers of meteors are just one of two problems we're seeing with these fireballs stretching across the skies of the world, because there is a different phenomena happening at the same time. Things that look like meteors and fireballs, but very obviously can't be, at least to our knowledge. And indeed, there is a growing number of videos online of these bizarre objects being seen. What they are is unknown, but I will say it's becoming harder and harder to confirm what's real online and in video form at this point. So there's going to be one we're going to stick to that I think is a great example of this phenomena, and that I have yet to see disputed and has multiple angles of proof, making it pretty hard to believe that it's something obvious or that it was faked. And we're about to watch the video together. I do want to preface though that I'm probably going to have to edit the audio and distort it so that I don't get hit with a copyright for the atrocious music in the background on the car radio. Here it is for you now.
I can never get it. Too many mother. I should have left out reach for I know for too long to get it. What the fucking kitty like dogs in my ears of that day. To me, it's crazy. It's going to something that I can't be. I don't get it. Oh, wish you quit when I know that. What the heck? Probably. Do you actually have money off? Totally. He didn't quite hate that. But he took me like blood about. He got my body a lot. I know, but these months I bitch that. Every post thing. No, I think that. No, I haven't reached this. I'd be lucky about it. No, it is a weird. I do.
Wow, to say the least. As you can see, this object does bear all the hallmarks of the meteors we have seen previously, and tracking down the original file, I believe this was spotted over the skies of Dallas. And this object initially coming towards Earth, like the other meteors and fireballs, begins to move in various directions, nearly completely course correcting and heading back upward. The movements are not quite as rigid as a plane either, but seem to be more fluid, with the fireball orb thing also seeming to speed up and slow down at different intervals. This is one that has been fairly widely reported as being an unknown object. No alternate close-up footage has come out to show if this is perhaps some sort of mix-up, and the various other angles show the object's maneuvers and solidify this is not an AI generation, and this is not just a plane, from what we can tell. Let me just interrupt here really quickly. The only attempt at debunking this I have seen says it's either a skydiver with a flare attached to him, or it's a plane practicing some sort of pyrotechnic stunt with flares attached to the back of it. I think it's pretty obvious it's not either of those, as far as I can tell. But I went through and double checked, and when you're seeing either of the examples, there's a smoke trail. We need much explanation. It's obvious when that's what it is. So I'll show you a couple examples of those. I've seen this online on some comments. It seems like very few people actually think that, but the ones that do, if you look at it, they all kind of seem like bots. And so I went online, I looked up to see if anyone was writing articles saying that. And the first one that popped up, I went to and I clicked on it and I was like, this doesn't even read like a real person wrote it. Tried to view the person who had authored the article saying it's a plane doing pyrotechnics. He doesn't really exist from what I can tell. And then I went and copy and pasted what he wrote into one of those AI writing checkers, and it was AI generated. So when the articles defending that position are also AI, and the video evidence doesn't have anything to suggest that it actually is one of those pyrotechnic stunts going on, I get a little even more suspicious as to what this actually is. And indeed, the raw video is filled with so many hilarious things, like the nail extensions missing from all but one finger, the specific music and what's being said, and the people talking. It's all almost like a skit at this point. And the phone filming that's also being filmed makes this something that if it was AI, would be beyond concerned, because we would be cooked. There'd be no way to ever trust a video again. As such, if there was an example of a video I think we can trust as being genuine and not AI, I do think it's this one. But as I said at the beginning of this video, it is not alone in its bizarreness, as these meteor showers are beginning to become more common. And it's clearly, obviously not a meteor. I want to reiterate, indeed over the past year, there have been some other instances of this same sort of phenomena of objects that look like fireballs but display some sort of control. But I don't want to include anything that I cannot be reasonably sure wasn't manipulated. And I also want to make sure we stick to just March, because that's when things are getting really spicy. But from everything we are seeing, it does seem pretty clear to me that something else is going on. And when I say something else is clearly going on, I don't mean aliens. And I'm disappointed that people are still jumping to that thing right away. And I've made it clear over this past year or so of making these videos that I think the only aliens are going to come from the government and their labs. In the craft we are seeing are top secret projects that have been in the work for years. And there is quite a bit of evidence for that, but that's a topic for another time. And so if it's not aliens that are causing the increase in meteors smacking into homes and the craft seen executing strange maneuvers over the skies of America, then what could it be? Well, the more circumspect individual may notice the narrative developing around this whole thing. We mentioned the classic meteors excuse, which is used to cover up for things that simply aren't meteors. And that's been pretty well taken as the mainstream media line, but I don't want to reiterate too many points. And so I think returning to that Ohio object colliding with the Earth is worth doing, because if NASA is missing a 14,000 pound chunk of rock raking into the atmosphere and smacking into the planet in Ohio, it seems like that's a big thing to miss. Because if I was given billions of dollars to make sure these sorts of things don't happen, or that if they are going to happen, we know about and warn about them in advance, I'd feel pretty silly if I missed this one. And so taking this larger than that, this is not an American phenomena. In fact, it's actually a pretty much global one at this point, with a huge chunk of Europe seeing these, and even some of the Middle Eastern areas, with Turkey's citizenry sharing some confirmed sightings themselves. And so just in the month of March alone, we've had a really strange shift from there's no increase in meteors, you're just imagining it, to there is an increase in meteors, to we're dismissing them for unknown reasons. And in the articles I've read, it's sort of framed as like an accidental missing of these objects, which might make sense, like I said, if this was one or two, and if it was just in America, and it was just NASA, for instance. But you have NASA, a bunch of military organizations, and other countries' space programs and militaries also missing these. So you're now kind of trying to suggest to me that a bunch of accidents are happening at the same time. And I don't really like that, and I don't trust it when a bunch of accidents in something as high stakes as this start just popping up at random, especially when it's people's jobs to notice these sorts of things. In fact, there are sightings in France, Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, as well as various other countries. You've also got Turkey with its own sighting that's been posted online. Turkey, who is in range of the latest Middle Eastern hissy fit, where rockets are flying every which way from a bunch of places. I gotta say, come on, man. With your military and space object detection systems on high alert, you're missing this sort of thing? Come on, son. It looks almost exactly like a missile from a distance, and even if you thought it was likely a meteor, I would think you'd be scrambling some sort of defense just to make sure, because we really don't know at this point. And so we either believe that the supposedly world's foremost experts with billions of dollars of programs and materials are missing all these things simultaneously, globally, or something else is happening. And I think something else happening is a pretty reasonable perspective to take on this, especially with this one example in March 8th of 2026, early on in the month, of a truly spectacular fireball sighting, which was able to be seen by countries hundreds of miles apart, yet was completely missed by detection systems in the European Space Agency. We have people from Germany through France to Austria and all sorts of other areas over there, all spotting this thing and even hearing it and getting video of it. But apparently the European Space Agency's telescopes completely missed it. And also their website has a really weird lie, but we'll get to that in a second. And so these are the sorts of things we're talking about. Large, obvious objects. And here I'm going to read from the European Space Agency website. And evidently they think we are fools. At approximately 8:55 CET on Sunday the 8th of March 2026, a very bright fireball moving from the southwest to the northwest was observed by many people in Belgium, France, Germany, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. The fireball glowed for approximately 6 seconds, leaving a visible trail in the sky before fracturing into pieces. This may not seem strange to you at first, but it actually kind of is. Again, I'm no expert in the field, nor do I pretend to be, but applying some common sense, the typical meteor lasts somewhere from a second to a few seconds at most, according to a bunch of websites online. And so the ESA, or European Space Agency, says this one only lasted for 6 seconds, which would mean it was a slightly longer meteor, but not too out of the ordinary. Except for when you watch the video, I set a timer on it, and my timer was that it went for at least 12 seconds, which would make it well beyond the pale of normal meteor activity, and also double the time the ESA said. Not sure why they did that and if I'm missing something, but I thought that was odd. It made it seem a little cover-up-esque, but what do I know, right? I will say though, common sense will also suggest that we've also got this same meteor then blasting into a German village and damaging property over there, which would make this at least roughly 4 to 6 homes and buildings that were struck in March alone from just the reporting we have. And the chances of that are so extraordinarily slim, it's baffling. Like we said, it's supposed to be something like 1 home a year on Earth is struck by a meteor, and that's roughly 4 to 6 at least, just from what we have confirmed in just March of this year alone. That's the sort of thing that should have people very concerned. Further, I have to give it a come on, son, when you're trying to tell me this story of we just missed it. And that's hard for me to comprehend, because people simultaneously in countries in areas hundreds of miles apart all saw this thing across Europe. How are you guys missing it? It's your job. But also, it was so close, people were able to hear the noise it made. And the telescopes at the European Space Agency and its various locations are designed just for this sort of activity. And yet they all miss it? Really? This is also from the European Space Agency. The timing and direction of the impact indicate that the object was likely not visible to any of the large-scale telescopes, sky surveys that scan the night sky for such objects. The article then goes on to talk about time and how they have issues detecting quote-unquote small objects when entering Earth's atmosphere, depending on the time of day and location they're coming in from. Although I gotta say, once again, this is your job, and you have billions of dollars going to programs that apparently can't even protect you from what they're supposed to. Sorry, that's not a great look. And if this were just a singular instance of detection systems failing, that might be one thing. But when you have way more people's property being hit than ever before, and way more of these things flying more frequently than ever before, and they aren't being picked up by governments across the world, allegedly, then there is something major going on here. Once again, it should be something like 1 home a year. We are at 4 to 6. That is beyond wild. And that 4 to 6 number does exclude the massive impact in Ohio with a shockwave equivalent of 500,000 pounds of TNT and whatever damage that might have caused. And here's a slight tangent, but I think an interesting one. This increase has made some people very happy who are in a niche in the economy I didn't really know existed, but is now booming. That would be meteorite hunters who have been traveling globally to get their hands on these rocks that are coming out of the sky, as they're evidently extremely valuable, with lower quality space rocks garnering a price of some $200 per gram. With an Indonesian dude in 2020 being the recipient of a 4.6 kilogram meteorite that blasted into his property. He got scammed out of it though, not knowing the true value of it, and sold it for mere pennies on the dollar. And then when sold again on the open market, the meteor went for some $1.85 million, which roughly 6 years later, prepare to be horrified, is a roughly $2.35 million meteorite in today's money. That is $500,000 worth of inflation in only 6 years. Keep that in mind. I'm gonna clarify here though, because I can feel the sciencey folks in the description and in the comments getting salty with me here. I know there are various terms for meteors, meteorites, meteoroids, comets. I'm using them pretty loosely here though, because I don't need to confuse everyone and myself by using a bunch of terms that basically describe the same thing for our purposes. So continuing on from there, not only do we have space rocks banging into Earth with no warning in the affected communities across the world, we also have something else going on. We touched on briefly the inexplicable sightings of objects that look like fireballs seeming to be under users' controls and changing directions, but there is more than just that. To our knowledge, no true investigation was ever done on this matter. It would appear on my end that a pattern is emerging, that not all of these meteors are so meteorish. And as we discussed at the beginning of this video, 2 clear and divergent problems are emerging that are kept under the same umbrella for the most part in popular narrative. The one being the vastly more prevalent and harmful meteors flying into Earth's atmosphere and also hitting Earth. And on the other hand, these other flying things that we don't quite have an answer for. The mainstream media has stayed oddly quiet on these more inexplicable findings and examples that we've just addressed, and it's really only lumped in when referenced as another example of a fireball, typically not including the full context of what happened in those accounts. But it's getting harder and harder to deny them as more and more angles and new instances of these phenomena pop up almost daily. Yet we are also missing another data point worth mentioning. It comes from a shocker just this past month of March, when this all began hopping again up to the next level. And it's from this wonderful YouTube channel on screen now, a channel which monitors astronomical events, maps the sky, films the sky, and does all sorts of cool stuff with this telescope camera. The guy behind this channel is very well regarded in the community and has a history of detecting things that otherwise don't really get reported. And so one day he was filming the sky when his camera, telescope contraption thing, caught what looks very similar to these fireballs seen on Earth, but I believe way higher up. And it's a brief exchange that occurs, but it's there and it's weird. On the left-hand side of the screen, at first nothing seems off until all of a sudden one of these fireball objects flies into frame and pretends he's auditioning for Need for Speed Tokyo Drift, displaying some more of these advanced maneuvers we saw over the sky of Dallas before it drops off frame for good. This is something that just doesn't happen. Space objects making course corrections like this isn't a thing, and you can't convince me it is, let alone that many direction changes. This is a sighting that in most people's minds immediately applies some sort of control, and how similar it looks and operates to the fireballs seen over Earth and how it doesn't burn out leaves many, including myself, asking questions and connecting dots. You would think that potential proof of controlled flight all the way up there would make headlines, but nah, G. We left curiosity behind a long time ago when the state deemed it was too dangerous. As such, we have to ask ourselves then, what all could be going on here? And really it's a question of what could be going on with these two different phenomena under the same umbrella. On the one hand, we have the meteors that are definitely meteors because chunks of them are ending up in people's homes. So let's just start there for now. Why are so many of them happening now in March than ever before? And there are really no good stories from the mainstream. So if you look at more alternate, yet still very well regarded thought leaders in the space community, there's a pretty cool, little bit disturbing and very compelling theory related to 3I Atlas. Atlas, once again, I'm not a space expert, at best slightly above average knowledge, enough to know I'm not a master of the realm by any means. So there's no onus on me to use fancy terminology, and I'm going to explain it this way. Atlas is a really big rock from a distant land in space far, far away. So far it, according to the narrative, entered our solar system from a different one, a very rare phenomena to our knowledge. It also got close enough for a scientist to give it a peep and try to learn if it holds secrets from other parts of the universe. That I think is a more reasonable explanation, but I will admit I haven't done enough research to totally think that the other one is not true, with other people believing that 3I Atlas is a spaceship traveling to us from some place in the universe that it left a long, long time ago, and really a galaxy far, far away, coming to us either for nefarious or not so nefarious purposes, depending on who you ask. In either case, the speculation is that rock from 3I Atlas is breaking off as it passes through our solar system. Atlas is enormous, coming in at roughly 3.1 miles to the best of our knowledge, meaning it has a lot of rock to spare. And since we haven't entered a new comet belt and the amounts of them coming to Earth are so high above the normal, it's believed that these chunks of rock broken from 3I Atlas are beginning to enter Earth's gravitational pull and subsequently its atmosphere. And this starts with smaller rocks, and then eventually it will lead to bigger ones with time. How big, we don't know. How long, we don't know. But like I said, Atlas is enormous and has a lot of size to spare. So there is a chance really big rocks start coming off that hunk of rock flying through space, and that they don't burn up in the atmosphere and make far larger and more harmful impacts with Earth's surface. This is a theory postulated by experts who don't want to be considered anything special, and laughed at by the experts who want to be thought of as special. The ego difference here is showing massively, because this theory is getting proven right daily as impacts ramp up, and seemingly the meteors get bigger. The other thing that proves this may be true is that the people operating these detection telescopes are used to looking in the same general places. And if they aren't looking in the same direction of 3I Atlas and instead these other previous comet trails, then they might be missing what would otherwise be easily detected objects. And if true, the ramifications of this level of hubris could be astronomical, pun intended. Assuming then that these are rocks and that this is not space loogies from angry tube babies from Epstein's underground laboratories, then I am pretty satisfied with that reasoning for the first half of the equation. However, that would not answer what the second half of this whole thing is. The objects which cannot be explained, showing signs of intelligent control, or just control, because I've seen people driving and I know that there are no connections between intelligence and the ability to operate a vehicle. So sticking to our examples, I can be confident are genuine or the best we've got. Then we have control, high altitude capabilities, sound coming from them, and the ability to possibly mask as a typical fireball, among other qualities. But the one that really gets me is that although these objects travel faster than we typically see, they don't seem to travel fast enough for a meteor, or at least most of them don't. Meteoroids, rocky or metallic bodies from outer space, enter the Earth's atmosphere at very high speeds, ranging from 11 kilometers per second to 72 kilometers per second, or 25,000 miles per hour to 160,000 miles per hour. For comparison, the ISS orbits at 17,000 miles per hour. The fastest bullets travel at about 1,800 miles per hour, so meteoroids and in general, celestial objects are very fast. But these objects, especially those seen in the 3 videos we have looked at, don't seem to show that kind of velocity and speed. They are too slow, which can be said of a lot of the objects we believe might be coming from 3i Atlas as well, which would make sense if they're not traveling from as deep of space and haven't picked up as much speed. But we are done with those for now and are focusing on the really weird ones. However, there is someone better than me in this realm that discusses this, a humble expert, and I think he's someone who's far better at explaining this than I am.
By a double SpaceX launch, 2 in the same day, visible from 22 different states. And since then, there have been several other fireballs, as most of you know. It would be very easy for me as a space weather guy, meteors are part of space weather, to jump on this and get a bunch of views. Given the fact that there is extra material coming with the galactic current sheet and we have been noticing it, it has been detected in the form of extra dust by event horizons out past Pluto, all the way to the solar corona. It would be very easy for me to jump on this and say, ooh, could this be the galactic current sheet? Scare you a little bit, get a bunch of clicks that way. The fact of the matter is, I know meteors. I know what we should be expecting. These things are not meteors. They are moving far too slowly to be meteors. If you watch them, you will see that is the case. UAP landing craft, destroyed spy satellites. This is something that was in orbit. Okay, these are not meteors. This is something that it was either already in orbit or it slowed down and then entered our atmosphere. These are not meteors. And so these are either UAPs or we are witnessing the greatest AI video hoax in history. I will admit I am not the best when it comes to noticing AI videos, but I think at this point it's fairly safe to say everybody agrees that there are a ton of these fireball sightings, and at least the vast majority of them are not AI. There are enough of them out there. NASA is even mentioning, hey, we have an uptick. And I'm telling you that the explanation that would normally be given, which I said several days ago, that in the spring to summertime, there should be an uptick in meteors. That happens every single year. What we're seeing now aren't meteors.
And I think that is very interesting, and it aligns pretty nicely with this idea of controlled movements we are seeing in the sky and out in space from various onlookers, which then means we have to ask some questions. If not all these meteors from the 3i Atlas are meteors, then what are they? Because there aren't any known launches of US or civilian satellites or craft that match all these time frames, meaning if it is us, and this is human objects entering our atmosphere, it's either coming from a supposed enemy state, or perhaps it's part of a deeper covert mission, like Project Bluebeam, a topic we don't have time to get into now in here, but does align well with what is being seen. If you want that rabbit hole, let me know and we'll go down it some time. And I do have to agree with this man's observation. While some of these are clearly meteorites due to their speed, others just don't match that idea whatsoever, which is pretty horrifying to contemplate, but contemplate it we must, because that's really only the beginning. This could be an entirely unrelated phenomena to these controlled aircraft, but something that always gets me are these flying objects being seen all over America are aligning nicely with the time frame of increased flight issues. For instance, there are entire airports being shut down, there are hundreds of planes being diverted from areas, there are cancellations, there are delays, there's a lot of stuff going on. Before my yap, check out the following video.
It's just crazy. I can't believe this is happening. I don't have much more information. I'll let you know when I get it.
I kind of missed that.
Oh, the information I do have, they are diverting everyone right now, so there are no more inbound aircraft, at least from United Airlines. They're diverting everyone out of Denver because of this crazy situation.
So, to update you guys, Denver Airport has no power. There's no flights coming in or out. We are stuck on the runway. So if you have a flight coming out of Denver, I would check the status. They're diverting all planes coming into Denver at this point. So I don't know what's going to happen. I'm never going to get home. Again, if you're at the Denver airport, there is no power in the airport. No flights are landing or taking off. They're being diverted to other airports. So check your flights.
In relation to this video, it turned out that hundreds of flights were canceled, delayed, and diverted just in that one instance at Denver Airport. Denver being the largest airport in the US by a lot, covering 53 square miles or 33,920 acres, give or take a few. It's the airport with the most conspiratorial lore that I'm aware of, But for those not interested in the lore of that place, for an airport of that magnitude and critical importance with tons of runways and terminals, and has this hold on the economy and the movement of our country, to have a complete shutdown means something major must be going on. No great reason was given though, and most of these stories just say it was a power outage. And power outage is a convenient excuse and a classic one in cover-up culture. In such situations where you don't want to say what actually happened, it's easy to just say, oh, the power went out and we had to cease everything. Sort of silly though, because a very large amount of the electricity for the airport is generated by a solar system, which has permanently poisoned hundreds of acres of land. That's a topic for another time. That said though, I feel like it would be enough to continue operations and not have a complete shutdown of the airport. Also, when the airport's the only one reporting that issue and no one else in the area does, and the airport's blaming the electricity producers, I gotta wonder how that could be, because I would think a lot more people would have been affected as well. But one instance, come on. All right, it could just be something random happen, Cooper. It really could be a power outage. But there are actually 2 instances of a shutdown at the Denver airport in March alone. And on top of that, it spreads further than that. Because alongside these other 2 phenomena is a third, arguably, maybe even more bizarre happening that is just now breaking into the news. The ramping up of reports of drones, an unidentified craft, doing flyovers of military bases and airports. You may be asking yourself if this is 2024 or even early 2025 all over again, and although it may seem that way, it is actually 2026, believe it or not, and history seems to be rhyming like the Sugar Hill Gang, which means fast because this story is just now breaking. Multiple US military bases have experienced strange, very minimally covered airspace violations since these meteor, quote-unquote meteor, flyovers began. These drone sightings have only pockets of information available about them, but a lot to read between the lines on. And it's only adding more to the mystery. So these so-called drones, for which no pictures have been given, shocker, are presumably large, maybe even extremely large, because the bases they are flying over are not only enormous themselves, but very well guarded against drone attacks. These, however, as we shall see, are skirting right by on their way, so from the bat, they're clearly not civilian craft. But we don't have to speculate that these drones are substantial, because reports tell us so without even having to fully tell us so. As mentioned, these bases are huge, requiring miles of flight to and fro, something that very few publicly available drones can do. Furthermore, the reports are saying that these drones are scouting bases for hours on end, only to fly away and be replaced by a new one. Whose drones they are is reported as being unknown, but considering the security state we live in, that seems hard to imagine. And where these drones are going after scouting the base is also reported as being unknown. How? I don't know, because that seems like kind of a big deal. Before continuing, let me repeat, flying for hours on end, which requires a massive battery and therefore some serious drone technology, or really technology for whatever this actually is, because we don't really know it's drones, that's just what it's being called. We do know from reports of some of the things that they were interested in while over these US military bases. And so now let's cut to the Barksdale Air Force Base, where some of the major sightings have been happening. Barksdale is a 22,000 acre base, which is 34 square miles or 89 square kilometers for the people who use that deplorable system. So massive is an understatement. It is among one of the many gems in the American military industrial complex's complex crown. It's important to note its size though, once again, because fairly deep within the base, some miles, are kept B-52H bombers, which are nuclear capable, massive airplanes used in top level classified campaigns. And from the very little info we have, the reporting is saying that these drones were very interested in said bombers, and this base was very possibly chosen because it houses them. So not only did the drone operators know that these bombers were there, they knew where they were stored within that huge area. And I return to the fact that this is a big base because that implies some knowledge of base operations, as it's not uncommon to move around such aircraft as well as the nuclear armaments so that they're not always in the same place to prevent someone from, taking advantage of that. But it also means that these drones are capable of flying miles and miles while avoiding various takedown methods, which very few drones, if any in the civilian market, can fly that far and that long and do reconnaissance. But for what I mean about civilian drones just not being able to do this, I'm going to reference an example of a really highly regarded civilian drone, that being one that DJI sells, and it's a drone used for filming movies and other high-end budget productions known as the DJI Inspire 3. It's pretty massive and comes in at a $16,000 price tag. And yet, despite its size and weight capacity, it can really only maintain flight for something like a half an hour, and likely even less than that at a big distance. So we are talking then about something above and beyond that level of drone technology and above that price point, which implies to me, and I'm speculating based on the evidence, some degree of state actors and government involvement. I don't know whose, but it seems pretty clear to me that such tech access and power and money could really only come from such an entity, because I think the government pretty obviously knows these drones and where they originate from, if they're really drones. I'm going to use that term in quotes because they have to take off and land somewhere. And the FAA and bases that house nukes tend to be pretty aware of their airspace. As such, I have to wonder if these drones and what they really are could possibly be related to these weird maneuvering craft in the air that are disguised as fireballs, but I don't know. And that is speculation. And yet, based on the evidence, we know that this threat was big enough for Barksdale Air Force Base to order a shelter in place from March 9th. And the following is from ABC News. Quote, certainly it seemed to be more than just your average drone enthusiast who just pushed it too far, said ABC News contributor Mick Mulroy, a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense. Quote, it looked like this was deliberate and intentional to see just how they would react. The briefing includes a determination that the drones were different than what the typical consumer could purchase off the shelf. They appeared to be custom built and required advanced knowledge of signal operations. The analyst said with high confidence they expected unauthorized drones to continue to operate in and around Barksdale Air Force Base in the immediate future. Quote, the drone incursions at BAFB pose a significant threat to public safety and national security since they require the flight line to be shut down while also putting manned aircrafts already in flight in the area at risk, the document said. The FAA referred ABC News to the military for comment. The Louisiana State Police, which is also assisting in the investigation, declined to comment. Quote, flying a drone over a military installation is not only a safety issue, it is a criminal offense under federal law. We are working closely with the federal and local law enforcement agencies to investigate these incursions. The security of our installation and the safety of our people are top priorities, and we will continue to vigilantly monitor our airspace, Captain Reniger's statement said. There's a lot in there that stands out. We have the U.S. military admitting that drone incursions are happening on top bases, where nuclear weapons and delivery systems are stored. These drones are advanced enough to bypass signal jamming and takedown attempts, as the rest of the article discusses, and the drones fly for hours, which requires large craft with a large battery system or alternate power source. They block flight paths and cause enough of a disturbance to shut down the runways of a top U.S. military installation on our own soil, and the officials are expecting this to continue with high confidence moving forward. High confidence, I say once again. And they admit it's a national security risk because not only does it prevent defense and attack aircraft from getting airborne, it prevents ones that are already airborne from landing. What? Imagine if one of those B-52H bombers loaded with a nuke or multiple of them took off from that base and a drone or multiple drones slammed into that boy. What would happen? The results would be catastrophic. And honestly, I know the US military leadership is a laughingstock at this point, but do we have no hustle up about this? No one's gonna try and stop it? Really? We are in the middle of another war, and they're trying to warn us of attacks on the US, and yet this is being allowed to slide. Really? I made multiple references to the fact that I think a false flag is coming in the past several videos, and this is not making me feel very good. Let's just say that. And then we've also got other things at the exact same time happening, like this article. In the past 10 days, multiple unidentified drones have overflown the DC area military installation housing US Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, US Secretary of State Mark Rubio, and senior Pentagon leaders, according to a Washington Post report. Citing a senior administration official and 3 others reportedly briefed on the situation, the Post reported that the sightings have led to heightened security measures as the White House weighed whether to relocate Hegseth and Rubio. The cabinet secretaries were reported to be living on Fort McNair, just a few miles from the White House and Capitol building, in October. The article then gets far more alarming, talking about how multiple military bases, domestic ones, have raised their security level threats in recent weeks, and some have initiated even temporary lockdowns over these sorts of issues. In addition to that, MacDill Air Force Base in Florida, the article says, the headquarters of the U.S. Central Command, Special Operations Command, and other major units shut down on Tuesday due to reports of a, quote, suspicious package. On Wednesday, MacDill officials raised the base's force protection level to the second highest of 5 levels. That evening, an unspecified safety concern prompted a brief shelter in place. Don't know how I feel that the military is cowering over suspicious packages, including the top level, some of literally like the highest ranking and highest tier operations programs in our country are getting shut down over drones and weird packages. Something else has got to be going on, and this is all starting in the exact same time that these quote-unquote meteors and strange craft are also increasing over America. Come on, man. Something has to be going on. What is it, though, really is the question. But I do find it hard to believe that these strange meteors and craft being sighted in the sky, along with airport shutdowns and weird redirections and flight cancellations, alongside U.S. military bases with nukes closing down over strange craft, aren't interlinked. And it just keeps getting stranger because while writing this video, I found more info that this is not just these bases, but now pair this story that we're reading, which shows one narrative with this clip of Trump just talking about this recently when he was asked a question about it for good measure. And I gotta say, Notice the lies, man. It's wild.
There have been drone swarms flying over sensitive military installations in the U.S. over the last couple weeks. Reports are they don't look commercial and they can't be jammed. Is this another country's military?
I don't think so. We have a great system of. Do you notice that over the last 4 or 5 days you haven't seen very many drone hits, right? We have some unbelievable anti-drone weaponry that's incredible. But you want to have, like, for instance, the ballroom. We have a very powerful very steel roof with other things in it. And you want to have, if you're building a building for security, like just like his judge's opinion, you have to have security for the president and his staff. You need heavy, strong ceilings. You need seriously thick, bulletproof, ballistic glass. And we have that. Other buildings don't, fairly modern buildings don't have that. They have roofs that are weak and they have regular glass windows.
There was this incident down at Barksdale, though, where apparently a whole swarm of drones for a couple hours was over the flight line. There's a lot of really important planes down there.
Yeah.
How concerned are you that this is something?
Well, I'm not concerned. Yeah, I know about it. They've checked that out and they've gotten to the bottom of it. You have a lot of people now that fly these things all over the place, and we're coming down very hard on them. But we're able to take them out militarily. We're able to take them out very easily. And a new thing is lasers. The lasers are becoming very, very effective. You hit a drone and it melts in air. It's a beautiful thing to see. If it's coming at you, having a laser is a very nice thing. But we have there are methods of defending against it. I mean, the advantage from the standpoint of defense is they don't go very fast relative to a F-22, that plane right over there. They go very slow. They can be also shot out of the air by high quality aircraft, which we have more than anybody ever had.
We have no references anywhere else to these being shot down, and evidently they were allowed to fly for hours and days over military bases. I'm finding it hard to believe that we suddenly popped out a laser and blasted them. I'm also finding it hard to believe that we don't know what these are. But the way Trump brushes this one off and starts talking about bunkers and security measures does not make me feel very good. That all being said, though, you guys, my final conclusion is this. We have all these pieces starting to come together. I don't know what precisely this all means. I just know that it means something. At least that's how I see it. But I would be curious to know what you guys think. And if you did make it this far, thank you so much for watching. I am really grateful and I love what I do. So just thank you guys so much for being here. Let me know what you think is going on down below, because all I think and believe for sure is that these are all connected. How though? I'm not quite there yet. So I want to know what your guys' thoughts are. Make sure to comment them down below. Just thank you guys so much again for watching. It really means the world. And I can't wait to see each and every one of you guys in the next one.